I don't know you that well and I want to get to know you.
Yeah.
Tell me about your life.
Sure.
You're from California.
Yes.
You're of Samoan heritage.
Yes.
And you are an ass kicker. What else can you tell us?
God, how much time do you have? I'm just kidding.
We've got an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay, we're in it. We're locked in then. I grew up, like you said, in Southern California. I got 2 siblings, older sister, younger brother. I'm a middle child. I think that speaks a lot to my incessant need for attention. And I think I grew up an athlete. I played soccer my whole life. Almost went to college for an athletic scholarship, but my freshman year of high school, I tore everything in my knee.
Oh, goodness.
Which kind of redirected my path a little bit.
And I want to say,
sure.
I want to jump right in on
Please
that
do.
one. I know so many people that were headed for sports, got an injury, took their life in an altogether different direction.
Yeah.
They were heartbroken, but it actually made their lives better. John Krasinski went to go play basketball at Brown.
Really?
Injured his knee, took an acting class, and the rest is history.
Wow, I did not know that about him.
Justin Baldoni was drafted as a soccer player. Same thing, tore up his knee, took an acting class, now is famous actor and director. There's so many times that happens.
And me and John Krasinski look a lot alike.
You do.
So
you do.
It would just be a hat on a hat if I followed him. Can't copy him, I have to take a different direction. Otherwise, people keep getting us confused.
Yeah, so often.
But I did take a different direction because even at like 14, when I tore everything in my knee, I was like, I don't think sports are forever. I think I need to find something else. But even when I look back now, when I was at practice, I played soccer controlled my whole life. I played every single weekend of every day for I started playing at a very high level at like 7 or 8, and then I didn't stop until I was 17. So I think even then, when I would go to practice, like sometimes my coach would be like, tell me a funny story, like tell everybody a story. And I would just entertain everyone and tell jokes. So even then, looking back, I think I knew like that's what I really wanted to do was entertain.
There was a class clown element there.
And that was me.
Yeah.
After I tore everything, I really started thinking about what I would do if sports didn't work out for me. So I thought, because sports were a huge part of who I was and my identity at the time, I thought, well, maybe I'll do sports and entertainment, like sports media. I entertained being like a sports and entertainment lawyer for a little because I do love to argue and I love to be right. So I thought lawyer, obviously. But then I realized how much schooling goes into being a lawyer. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be in school for that long. So I took the media route. And I remember I asked my parents, like after I got an academic scholarship, because I did get some soccer scholarships, but I decided not to take them because I got an academic one. So I remember asking my parents, like, are you guys okay if I just don't play anymore and I just go and be a student? And of course, my parents was like, of course we don't care.
Yeah.
Please, go.
You're going to college.
Yeah. I went to college and I majored in journalism and communication. So I got both. I double majored both for all 4 years, graduated. And then when I graduated, I did a lot of work in college to pad my resume. So I did lots of I had an extensive reel. I had many clips. I profiled so many players. I worked many different sports. I was really trying to set myself apart. And, turns out your parents are right about a lot of things and how hard it is to get a job out of college, especially in a very saturated, industry like sports and entertainment. So I just took the first job I could get out of college, which is I actually worked with my mom. I worked for my mom actually in PR, which is so funny because that's the complete opposite of journalism. It's honestly the enemy of journalism is PR. So, but it ended up helping me because I learned a lot about PR too. So I did that for I think a year and a half. And then I just got picked out of a resume pile randomly. I just kept sending out my reel and my resume to lots of different sports entities. And then the NFL picked up my resume and then called me and I did a lot of interviews and I ended up not even getting the job I applied for. They gave it to someone else. But they really loved me. So they wrote me a letter of recommendation and pushed me to another desk. And then I waited again another 2 months and again, same rounds of interviews, 5, 6 interviews. And then I finally got hired. So I started working there in 2019. And then
where was this?
At the NFL.
At the NFL, right on. Okay.
And so I worked there from August 2019-ish until right after Super Bowl. And then I got fired. and then I was like, well, it looks like I'm going to have to redirect again.
Yeah.
So that was very difficult for me at the time. But I think 2 weeks maybe after I got fired, the pandemic hit. And so then everybody's at home and everybody's stuck and nobody can do anything. And
So what are you going to do other than make TikTok videos?
Yeah, well, my boyfriend actually encouraged me to start posting on TikTok.
Okay.
And I thought I was too old for the app at the time. Even now, I'm like geriatric in TikTok years. Like when I tell other TikTokers how old I am, they're like, damn.
Yeah.
When I tell them how old I am. But my boyfriend encouraged me because I loved telling stories. And I used to post little rants about shit I hated. I used to post I should have asked, can I cuss? Is that okay?
Fuck no.
Okay. Okay.
But I want to talk about this. I think it's really good for especially young people.
Yeah.
It's good and a reminder for all people, especially young people, to hear to help build resilience.
Totally.
That sometimes one door closes and another door opens. It's a cliche. It's a Hallmark card.
Yeah.
All kinds of avenues can open vis-a-vis heartbreak.
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I realized then, and I kind of already touched on this with you, but I realized then that a lot of my worth and value and validation I got was from my career and my accomplishments. And I think it was kind of like a renaissance I re-experienced because, and I've unpacked this in therapy now, but when unpacking my internalized misogyny and going through it, getting fired from the NFL was a major turning point for me in a lot of ways, but also it forced me to ask myself if I even really liked football. Did I even really like sports, or did I just like that I was one of the only women that worked in sports? And so that was very hard for me to unpack because as someone who has done a lot of work to let go of my male validation and like my internalized misogyny, it was like very hard for me to accept that maybe everything I had been building towards for however many years and all the work and hours I put into being a journalist and being a sports journalist, that at the very center point, it could have been driven by wanting to be accepted by men or validated by them. And that was very hard for me to unpack because I was like, there's no way that I've like hated them for this long and I've stood up to them and I've stood up for myself. And then at the very end of Rainbow Road, I end up finding out that the wizard's fake. Once I walk the yellow brick road, the wizard's just a guy behind a curtain. It's not even the wizard. And so I worked through that a lot in therapy. And I understand now that I do love football. And what I love about it is not necessarily the sport. What I loved was the human aspect of athletes. Like I thought that was my favorite thing to do, was to profile them and see them in a light that doesn't solely rely on their physicality. And I know now that is because that's how I feel about my own family, because Samoan men make the NFL in very, very high numbers. Considering how few there are of us in the world, it's unprecedented. And my dad was one of those men who made it. My dad didn't start playing football till he was like 20. And my dad got a full ride and got drafted. And so he had only been playing for like 3 or 4 years, which is, that's an insane statistic. And it's not unique to Samoan men at all. And so I think now that I've worked through it, I think that was what was driving me, was I really wanted people to see us, and by us, I mean Samoan people, in a light that doesn't solely rely on us being the best at sports, like being the biggest, being the fastest, being the strongest. I wanted to show us in a different light. And I thought maybe that was the way, was to go through sports because we're very prevalent there, and then maybe branch out from there. So that made me feel a lot better, made me come to terms with it a lot easier, because if I had found out I just actually hated sports, that would have been even more of a devastating blow to me than it already was to get fired. So while I was working there, I found out pretty quickly that I was unhappy. And I, again, had many jobs before that. I worked in many different environments. I worked with people I knew, people I didn't know. I describe it almost as like I climbed the mountain and I didn't like the view. And so standing up there and looking at it, I was like, well, I actually hate this. Like, I hate how I feel when I come here. I hate how I feel working here. Like, it wasn't at all what I thought. And so after I got fired, I remember my parents and like my mom, my dad was the first person I talked to after I got fired. And he was like, congratulations. And I think it's because I had been voicing how unhappy I was forever, but I'm not someone who quits, or I'm not someone who quits at all, but I'm also not someone who quits with no plan. And so I didn't have a plan, and I wasn't making any moves to make another plan. I think because I was just hoping it would work out like on its own. And I remember the day after I got fired, I was very, very depressed and very sad. And my family took me to Disneyland to try and cheer me up. And I remember my mom bought me a mug, and she told me, like, this is just to remind you that like you're intended for something greater. Like, this was not the path for you. And maybe you needed to walk it first to find out for yourself that wasn't the path for you. but now you know for sure, and something even greater is waiting for you, something better, something that's meant for you, because this wasn't meant for you. And I think I was trying for so long while I was working there to convince myself, like, this is it for me. Like, it doesn't feel very good now, but it will. Like, I just kept trying to like grin and bear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't. Like, well, I mean, I tried, and then they told me to leave. So they kind of made that choice for me. But
yeah.
But I'm grateful for it, because if they didn't, I think I would still be there. I would still be trying. I would still be in sports. I would absolutely still be pursuing that same goal if I wasn't like forced to realize that it wasn't my path at all and not my purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've really become such a strong voice of a generation and kind of new wave of feminism. And I just love your work so much. I said this the other day, but you're unabashed, unafraid, taking on, I hate to use the phrase toxic masculinity. I wish there was a better
it's all right.
phrase.
We can say it. I won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
You can say misogyny. That works better.
Misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pervasive misogyny.
Exactly.
How's that?
Period.
But I did want to ask you, talk a lot about in your work, on your shows and on social media about growing up Samoan American. I don't know many Samoan Americans. What was that like growing up? How did your background as an indigenous person, but not living on your native islands? But you talk so much about your family and your heritage. How did it influence you, and how does it inspire your voice?
Well, like I told you the other day too, and I've talked about this so many times, and I'm happy to, because I'm very happy that I am a lot of people's first exposure to Samoan people, which I think is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's wonderful that I get to be the first exposure, but I promise you I'm not the only one. There are many of us, and there are many far more talented than myself. And I'm happy to be one of the few that introduces people. And I think it influenced me in many ways, but I think more than anything, like I mentioned, Samoan culture prior to being colonized is matriarchal at its very genesis. And so women have held positions of power in Samoa for centuries. It's been very common. And so we didn't have gender roles. We didn't adhere to a gender binary. Like, those were not things that were part of who we were. They were things that were imposed and inflicted on us. And so, having been colonized, now it's a lot it can be a lot different in a lot of ways, but like culturally and historically speaking, we've always been very matriarchal, and my family runs that way too. A lot of my exposure to other Polynesian or Samoan families specifically runs the same way. Like, I always describe it as my mom is the sun of our family, so we all kind of move around her. And that's how many Samoan families are. Mine is not the only one that moves that way. And it's like, if it's okay with dad, great, but I have to ask mom. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you have Samoan men, a lot of times if they have older sisters, like, she has a really big say too in what he does. And Samoan culture, I think, at the very root is to live in service, right? It's to give with no expectation of anything in return. It's to serve, whether it's the Lord or your family or your elders. Like, that's how we move. That's how I was raised. And I think, as far as how it's influenced my content, I actually said this in an interview the other day, but like, if you know any Samoan women specifically, like, they are all exactly like me, which is they don't take shit. Like, they just don't. They don't tolerate disrespect. They don't tolerate shit ever. And so every Samoan woman I know is like me. So when I started doing TikTok, it was fascinating to me. And I think at the same time to everyone else, to see someone like myself, but that's only because they don't really know Samoan women the same way that I do. The same thing with my laugh. My laugh is not exclusive to me at all. Like, all Samoan people laugh exactly like me.
Do it. Can you demonstrate?
I've laughed a couple of times. Honestly, I'm sorry to the sound person. I keep this mic away from me, but my laugh will pierce.
Speaking of which, I was going to give you a note that those nails are something. But here's the problem. There's a little bit of like clickety-clack
clicking
into the mic. Have you gotten that note before?
Oh, yeah. Well, and also my personal jewelry, too, makes a lot of noise. So that's why I'm very careful.
It's all good. But if folks are listening and you hear clickety-clacking like a telegraph.
Sorry about that.
That's Drew's.
I'm sending a message at the same time.
10-inch nails.
I'm sending an SOS.
Sending a Morse code.
Yeah, I'm sending a telegraph.
Okay, let's hear the laugh, though. Let's hear it.
We've kind of heard it.
Come on.
You want me to force it, Rainn?
Yes.
You live in comedy. You should be able to entertain me.
You're an actor too. You're okay, a brilliant actor.
I'll give you a good one.
Pretend I said something funny.
You'd be surprised how many times I've had to fake my laugh.
Okay.
You'd be surprised.
That's good.
And guess what? That wasn't real. Yeah. Acting.
Boom.
And scene.
I would so cast you. I told you the other day you should absolutely do acting.
I'm trying.
I really feel like you would kill it out there.
I would love to, and I'll get rid of the nails. If any casting people are watching, I'll get rid of the nails. Okay? If you need me, let me know. I'm open.
You know what? But here's the problem with Hollywood casting people. Like, they don't want to hear that. This is what they want to hear. Like, I'm keeping the motherfucking nails.
Oh, okay.
So... Cast me. If you're going to cast me, the nails come with the package.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they like that. They're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's edgy.
Oh, good to know.
You know
okay,
what I mean?
well, I was lying. Maybe I was acting. Who knows? Cast me and we'll find out.
We'll never know.
The Soul Boom Podcast. Subscribe now on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you get your stupid podcasts.